Welcome all to the first panel for Graphic Justice 2020. My name is Dr. Tim Peters of the University of the Sunshine Coast. So first up, we have Dr. Amanda Muniz from Oliveira, from the Federal University of Pampa in Brazil. And hopefully I'm not murdering names and places too badly. And she is presenting today on There's Just One Final Test for You to Pass, Sexual Harassment in the Boys. And so, you know, notionally anywhere between 20 minutes and 40 minutes at this stage, Amanda. Take it away.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll try to share my screen here first. I've never done this before, but I think it's okay. It's not that difficult. There you go. Okay, everyone can see?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good morning to you all, since it's morning for me here. So I'm Amanda Muniz, senior lecturer at Federal University of Pampa in Brazil. And together with my colleague, Dr. Rodolpho Bastos, who could not be here today, I'm developing a research about sexual harassment in the boys, comics by Garth Ennis. So first of all, I'd like to start presenting some information about the comics. Created to be a satire of classical superhero comics, it is set in a universe where heroes work for a powerful corporation, Vought International, which monetizes them. Therefore, if to the public audience, the heroes, the superheroes, look fair and good, in fact, most of them are cruel. The Boys was originally published by Wildstorm, DC Comics, before moving to Dynamite Entertainment because of its anti-superhero tone. The critics are so heavy and so directed to famous superheroes as Batman or Superman that DC could not publish anymore. Curiously, it was a good thing according to Ennis because Dynamite gave him far more freedom than DC ever would have. So it was easier to him to publish and make his critics. Well, about the plot. Well, most of the superheroes in the series in the series universe are corrupted by their celebrity status and often engaged in reckless behavior, compromising the safety of the world. The story follows a small clandestine CIA squad, informally known as the Boys, led by Butcher and comprising Mother's Milk, The Frenchman and Female, and new addition, Hugh Campbell, who are charged with monitoring the superhero community, often leading to gruesome confrontations and dreadful results. In parallel, a key subplot follows Annie Starlight January, a young and naive superhero who joins the Seven, the most prestigious and also corrupted superhero group in the world, and the Boys' most powerful enemies. And our paper focused exactly on Starlight. In the issue 3, we see her join the Seven, Vaught's premier superhero team, and she is received by Homelander, the team's leader, and after she expressed all her admiration, he says that before joining the team, she has a final test to do. Then he asks her for oral sex. And here I brought the pages of the comics. I'm not sure if it's okay to read. I'll try. Here it's better. So on the first sequence here, we can see Starlight and Homelander, the leader of the Seven, meeting for the first time. And what is interesting here is that it's an epic scene. There are many clouds suggesting that they're hiding the skies. what creates the feeling of nobility, honor, respect. So we have it all represented here. And here's the dialogue. Oh my goodness, I didn't think you would be here. You are our newest recruit. Why on earth would I come to meet you? Because you're the Homelander, John. And it's not Starlight all the time, is it? So we have this draws here that remains that points to this notion that we think it's justice, something that it's very noble. And well, it's not that way. We'll see about that. Here they are meeting. And in January, welcome to the 7 Annie. I still can't believe I'm actually here. It comes as no surprise to me, Annie. Your performance in the trials was remarkable. We allow very, very few newcomers in the 7. We simply can afford to take the risk. I know. Please don't think I'm not taking this seriously. It's just, I've admired you for as long as I can remember. Your incredible kindness, how wise you are. You're going to have me blushing in a moment. Oh, I'm sorry, this is amazing. I mean, back in Desmond with the young Americans, we didn't have anything like this. There were teams we had to meet and at my aunt's apartment. There you go. Do you think you miss them? I'm sure I will. Is there someone special? Drummer boy from the team. We actually met at Capes for Christ in one of the junior ministries. That's great. And we didn't want to run things we're waiting. That's great. So I was just reading this sequence because we have some words about it here. Oh my God, I'm just anticipating. And wow, Homelander is wearing the American flag colors. We can see that. What makes him very similar to Superman, in my opinion. He's blonde, tall, muscular, and at first, his presence passed security. He is the ultimate American man, what is already told us by his name, Homelander. Starlight is shorter, also blonde. She wears white and yellow, and she's represented as a typical female protagonist. She believes in justice, in good, and she also believes in the 7 as a team of real superheroes. Her name is also interesting. Is she the starlight between the darkness of the narrative? On the first dialogue between her and Homelander, it is said that she is virgin, what can reinforce this interpretation of a pure girl, the perfect victim. She is really surprised with the final test that Homelander imposes. And here we have it. I'm not going to read it all again because I think it would be unnecessary. But here is the scene when he asks her for oral sex. And well, at first, Starlight's frightened, and thinks that some supervillain is controlling his mind. And then in the sequence, we have 2 other superheroes coming at the room. Black Noir and A-Train. They enter the room and she thinks that she's saved. But then they join to Homeland and the 3 asks her to do the same test. Homelander says, it's all a question of how badly you want to join the 7. So you can see it's clearly a violence because if she doesn't do what they say, she's not going to be part of the 7. Humiliated, she submits to the request. This is the presentation scene of the 7, and they tell us about the cruel reality of sexual harassment. After all, how can Starlight fight, even legally speaking, against the most powerful persons in the planet? How can women resist to the abuse they are subjected to by their bosses and coworkers, especially when dealing with powerful people? just like is represented here in the comic. So we have the sequence, and well, here is all the things that they are saying, and at final they say it's just how badly you want to join the team, and then the sequence is closed with this draw when we can see that it's not okay with that, of course, and more than that, she is recognizing that there's nothing she can do. Well, that is how I represent this drawing right here. Well, continuing the sequence, there's an interesting information here. After the crime, there's another thing that deserves our attention. Starlight is in the bathroom, disgusted with what just happened, and she finds a female hero, Queen Maeve. But instead of sorority, comfort, empathy, or any kind word, Queen Maeve is indifferent to her. We believe that this is a representation of how women can be an accomplice of sexism, either by genuine indifference or because they have already suffered the same thing and believe that there is no justice at all. They just become enchanted, or they don't believe in justice or in stopping this kind of thing anymore. And here we have the sequence. She's clearly sick with all that just happened. And here we have the Queen Maeve. The dialogue is short, so maybe I'll read it. Here we go. You're Queen Maeve. You're the Empress of the other world. Oh, my lady, I never thought I'd get to meet you. Ever since I was a little girl, I followed your adventures. I tried to do everything just like you. I wore my hair like you. I had a costume just like yours. I'm sorry, I know I'm guessing, but I just think you're the greatest woman who ever lived. You're an inspiration to all of us everywhere. And then the answer. Darling, how wonderful, how lovely, how super, how gratifying, how marvelous, how utterly peachy I fuck off. So that's the meeting between them two. Well, that presented, now I'd like to talk about the theoretical point of view that we adopted to analyze the comics. We are intending, because this is the first step of our research, but we intend to use Douglas Kellner and the media culture. That is a philosopher that we like a lot here. And it is interesting to use Kellner because he uses the tensions between the discourses in media. So in The Boys, for example, we have tensions between satire, critic, and also fetishism and normalization of sexual harassment, for example, in our view. So to Kellner, a media culture has emerged in which images, sounds, and spectacles help produce the fabric of everyday life, dominating leisure time, shaping political views and social behavior, and providing the materials of which people forge their very identities. Media culture is a culture of the image and often deploys sight and sound. The various media, radio, film, television, music, and printed media, such as magazine, newspaper, and comic books, privilege either side of sound or mix the two senses, playing as well on a broad range of emotions, feelings, and ideas. So we believe that the boy is a media that privilege sight and contain on it different perspectives about sexual harassment. Because media culture is not neutral, not critical, nor conservative in itself. It is an object of tensions, disputes. And well, according to Kellner, media culture itself provides resource which individuals can appropriate or reject, informing their own identities against dominant models. Media cultures thus induces individuals to conform to the established organization or society, but it also provides resources that can empower individuals against that society. It has contradictory functions, and this is what is interesting about The Boys. So, oh, I thought I had some more images here, but there's no problem. And media culture in United States and most capitalistic countries is a large commercial form of culture produced for profit and disseminated in the form of commodities. The commercialization and commodification of culture has many important consequences. First of all, production for profit means that the executive of the culture industries attempt to produce artifacts that will be popular, that will sell, or in the case of radio and television, that will attract mass audience. In many cases, this means production of lowest common denominator artifacts that do not offend mass audience and that will attract a maximum of customers. But precisely the need to sell the artifacts means that the products of the culture industries must resonate to social experience, must attract large audience, and must thus offer attractive products which may shock, break with conventions, contain social critique, or articulate current ideas that may be the product of progressive social movements. This is why, in our view, we can see moments that reinforce sexual harassment. For example, this scene right here, back here, where she's drawn in a kind of a sensual way, you know, with the makeup and the gestures. And at the same time, it is a very critical scene. So we have these tensions right here. We can also see the critic and the satire about the superheroes. So this is kind of a tension that we can see here. Well, just to conclude, this is just the first steps of our research. It is not complete yet. And I think that's all. Thank you so much for the attention, and sorry for my English. It's been a while since I spoke to a large audience aloud, so it's not the best right now, but I hope you could understand me. I hope you can understand me right here. So I think that's it. And now I'm going to finish.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Questions, comments, thoughts? We have plenty of time at this stage. So.
I have a question. It's more about the narrative and the continuance of it. I'm just wondering, in terms of Starlight's assault, if there's ever any kind of comeuppance for Homelander. Like, is there ever any punishment, or is it just like an eternal message of get assaulted, do nothing, you know, stay silent, survive?
Yeah, nothing happens to him. That's the main critic that we can do, because at the same time we have this heavy narrative about a good guy who does this in secret. We also have an punishment. So it's kind of as I told, it's tension between the comics all the time, because it wants to make the criticism, but at the same time it passes a kind of wrong message. As you told, do nothing, just go on with your life. What kind of criticism is that, in my point of view? So it's the tension here working in the narrative.
Well, I might follow that up then. So can you speak to how you're thinking about those tensions? Like, you sort of articulated, there's a number of tensions working throughout it, and there's additional ones that I can sort of see. Like, there's the public persona of the superhero versus the private, you know, ongoings that you're sort of describing there, and that's often a tension that operates elsewhere. There's potentially the tension between, this is supposed to be a satire or a critique versus the fetishization that you're sort of talking about. So how are you negotiating or thinking that tension in your project?
Yeah, well, as I said, we follow Douglas Kellner and we agree with him because these tensions, they appear in media culture because of the profit that the industry wants to make. So it is good to bring themes that are more progressive, just like, I don't know, maybe even the criticism about the superhero themselves, no one can be good all the time. I think that's the main message there. And don't be naive in our society. No one can be good at all the time. And at the same time, there is the opposite. There is the reinforcement of some structures that they are criticizing. So it happens because it's a kind of comic that people who are more conservative probably are going to enjoy. And by conservative, I mean people who really don't believe in justice or human rights or stuff like that, or just like, Homelander is the real superhero here because he does whatever he needs to do. And at the same time, the critics also cause the attention of people who question these representations. That, for example, here in Brazil, I could see some researches about how Batman and how Superman are a kind of fascist. So we can find these elements clearly in the boys. This is what the Garth Ennis is saying. So it also attracts people who are more critical too. And then I think these tensions are intentional to a larger audience. And I think they are the main line of the comic, maybe, because it trespasses all the comics. This is just the record, the cut that we make to analyze, but there are others, so I completely agree with you. There are the public and the private and the other of them that we can add later. But the main point for us is that these tensions appear there because of this trying to make it readable for most people, even progressive or conservative, and it's kind of trying to attract everyone that is possible. Of course, it's not possible all the time. Kellner himself says that audience is just like a sphinx. You don't know what they're going to think, but it's the tentative. They are trying to do this attractive. So I'm not sure if I answer what you asked me right now, but
no, that was helpful. So thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions or comments?
Yeah, I've got some. I don't know if it's a question or just me thinking out loud, but we'll try see what happens. So a couple of things spring to mind. Firstly, the kind of satire being mistaken for kind of the glorification of fascism is something that happens. So Judge Dredd had the same problem. So Judge Dredd was conceived as satire against the kind of Reaganism and Thatcher and the kind of right-wing crime control ideologies. And so he was this really right-wing judge, jury, executioner, hardline police officer, judge character, designed to show up the problems of that kind of way of thinking about criminal justice. And everyone loved him because they thought he was brilliant as a cutting through all of the bureaucracy and bringing justice direct to the streets. So they had to kind of reshape him and make the satire and the critical issues much more overt, particularly in some of the later issues. So that might be interesting as a comparator, or I don't know, just it's part of a broader kind of setting. The other thing is the kind of critical perspective on superheroes. So there's quite a tradition, I think, quite a strong history of superheroes being or reflecting a lot of the kind of critical problems of sovereignty, of Western like liberal democracy, of capitalism. And so I think there might be a whole kind of body of work that might be interesting for you to explore around. So like the hegemonic paradox is one concept. So Batman's the classic example. He tries to bring justice and social justice to the little people, but is actually just another rich white guy, right? And Chris Gavila's work around imperialism and superheroes and fascism is really interesting as well. So, and it seems to me that what The Boys is doing is tapping into that kind of very critical perspective on superheroes as a reflection of kind of dominant hegemonic kind of ideologies, if that makes sense. So yeah, really interesting stuff. And then of course that taps into all of the toxic masculinity, commodification of the body, sexism, and sexual violence and everything that comes along with sovereignty as well.
Okay, thank you for the comment. Yeah, we have the TV show now about The Boys, right? And here in Brazil, something very interesting happened because we have a character called Stormtroop, I think it is in English, Stormtroop. She's a woman, and the first time she appears, people here get excited because she's feminist and she is, how can I say that in English? Well, she's exposing all the things that is going wrong in the posture of the heroes, you know, just caring about money and being a bunch of people who don't care about people, just making movies. And everyone likes this character. But in fact, she's a Nazi. So everyone was just fooled about the narrative because she's trying to do something that is critical, but behind of all the things that she does, she is a Nazi. And there's a very interesting phrase that she says that people here commented a lot, that is, people like what I say, they just don't like the word Nazi. And it's very interesting for the moment we're living here today, because it's just that we have the critic, as you said, and people think that the critic is kind of the good thing there, you know, just like as I told, go Homelander, you're doing the right thing. And no, it's just the opposite. And that is very interesting to analyze too, through a perspective of audience studies, because as I said, you don't know what audience is going to think about the comics. And we didn't go through this path because of the pandemic, and we would have to do interview and other things like that, and we couldn't do right now here. But it's very interesting that you said other comics pass for it too. So it's very symptomatic of how people maybe can lose the point sometimes, and it's a very interesting phenomenon to think about. So thank you for telling about that.
Any other thoughts or comments or questions?
I have another random thought.
Go for it.
Kind of I'm a big fan of meta references, and it strikes me that there's something quite telling about the fact that, was it Marvel wouldn't let them continue publishing this, and they had to go to a smaller publisher, and I think that says a lot about the kinds of heroes that you get from Marvel and DC, and the kind of the dominance and unthinking kind of acceptance of the kind of power and governance that they represent. So I think there is a kind of a real world kind of dimension going on there as well that might be interesting to consider.
Sure. There's a sequence in other issues that there is a clearly critical satire about Batman, and it's very heavy to read because it's a rich guy who has the weapon and the armor, the costume, everything, but he is sexual addicted, so he can't control himself, and it gets out of control, and it's a very heavy sequence, but you can see that it's about Batman. It's all there. So I imagine the problems that they had in DC because of that kind of critic. So you're right. It's very interesting to think about it. The hegemony, and as I said, there are researches here in Brazil that points this kind of heroes, Marvel and DC, as actually really fascist. So it's interesting to think about it.
Any further thoughts or comments? We're sort of have the luxury of time at this point in the day or night. I don't know whether it'll be the case for other sessions, but we can make the most of it. Well, I guess one question I have is, so Amanda, where is this going for you? You're sort of saying this is the very beginning of a project. Can you speak a little bit more about what the plans for the project are?
Sure. We're trying to make a paper to publish here. Well, we don't have actually an idea of where this is going to end, but our major concern is that here in Brazil, we don't have a culture about law and comics approach. So we're trying to make a contribution to the area. And well, I've already emailed Thomas about that. We are very, not we, people here in Brazil and Brazilian law studies, they are very conservative about new themes, just like law and comics or law and music or this kind of law and pop culture in general. So we're trying to show people here that it's possible and that it's in fact very interesting and very useful to think about jurisprudence or law theory or even kind of dogmatic law. We can do that too through comics. So it's kind of a contribution for an area who doesn't exist here yet. We're trying to construct, we're trying to build this kind of interest, this kind of possibility to students. And many of my students were very interesting about what was going to do here today. They were just like, oh my God, you're talking about the boys. Can I see? And I was just like, it's 6 a.m. Oh no, thank you. But everyone, it's very excited. Everyone that knows us is very excited about this kind of project. And when I talked about graphic justice, a lot of my colleagues were very interesting. So this is why you have a lot of Brazilians here today, and I was very happy to contribute with that. You know, we're really trying to make law less conservative here in South America. So thank you for this event, and thank you for creating this space where we can talk about it and, you know, be taken seriously and not just like, oh, law and comics, what do they have in common? They do have a lot in common. So thank you for your question. And I think that's this is what we're trying to do here.
Fantastic. That sounds great. And maybe there should be a future graphic justice conference in Brazil.
So we're here, just let us know.
Well, you might need to organize it, but then we can turn up virtually or in person. So we've had a few additional people join. Just for those, the panel, which was originally 3 papers and was reduced to 2 papers, the second presenter has not arrived. I'm not sure whether that's technical difficulties, time differences, or what exactly, but we've had a fantastic paper and discussion from Amanda on the boys. I think we've got about 26 minutes left of the session, and I'm not sure what to do with it. Deborah has a question, go for it.
Hi everyone, good morning. I don't know if it's still morning over there. Can you hear me, please?
Sorry?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now, yes.
Okay. So my question is somewhat related to the project, and I would also like contributions from other participants in this room. So I wanted to know, what is usually the process leading up to writing the thesis or the project or the article? So is it that you randomly select a comic to criticize, or what is just the general process? What is your line of thought? How do you come about the topic, the comic you would criticize or do your research on? Yes, and where do you draw your philosophies from? Is there some kind of expertise that is needed for this line of work? So that's my question. Do you understand my question?
Yeah, you're essentially saying, how do we do graphic justice?
Yes, exactly. Basically, thank you.
Very brilliant question. I think Amanda can have the first shot, and then some of us might also jump in as well.
Okay. Well, for me, how can I say that? My academic formation, my academic background, it's very multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary. You know, I since I was in graduation, I read a lot of things, and I enter in contact with people from history or, you know, literature. And then I could see even early in my life that pop culture was a kind of theme in other areas, but not in law. And well, how is my process? I see things and the idea just come. I don't have a recipe for that, recipe for that, you know. For example, my first work about pop culture and law, not just comic exactly, but pop culture in general, was about the Lord of the Rings and law. And it was just a comment that someone made to me, and then it made me think about a lot of things in Brazilian law, and then I could relate it, the two of them. This paper about the boys, the process was the same. I was just watching the TV show, and then I discovered it was a comic, and then I read the comics in 1 week or less, and then I was just like, oh my God, there's a lot of things that we can talk about the boys and the law here. And it is very natural for me. I don't know for you guys how this works. So I'm not sure if it was helpful for you, Deborah, but this is how I do. It's very inspiration. I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Any other person?
Would someone else like to jump in? No? So I can speak to my own process, or Tom wants to jump in.
Well, I could. I'm actually just at the end of teaching a course on cultural legal studies, so I could speak at length about the cultural legal method and how it applies to comics.
You have 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay, let's see if we can do it in 2 minutes. So my kind of approach or way of understanding it is that basically what we're doing with graphic justice is it's part of a broader approach to law, which we can call cultural legal studies, which comes out of law and popular culture and law and literature, and law and film and all that kind of stuff. And the basic kind of premise of that, although people will probably disagree with me, is that what we're doing with cultural legal studies is we're reading cultural forms, cultural sources as legal sources. Okay, so we're looking at the kind of material objects of culture, and we're reading them as ways of engaging with discourse on law. So cultural sources, cultural forms, TV, film, literature, comics, whatever, become discourse on law and justice and legality. And there's some rich theoretical arguments you can make about sources of law and where we locate law in the institution, and that the institution is, again, another cultural form, another material object through which we try to access ideas of legality, and thus we can use other forms too. So that's the kind of broader premise around cultural legal studies. And then graphic justice specifically is basically just engaging with comics rather than film, TV, or whatever. And then there's methodological questions you might want to ask about how you then engage with comics as a form. And then there's a whole kind of discipline of comics studies which seeks to theorize and understand comics as a form and ways of reading and interpreting the kind of comics layout and structure and so on, which you can engage with in more or less as you want to. In some ways, graphic justice can be just about the kind of narrative that a comic tells and the way that narrative engages with kind of ideas of law and justice, or it can be a more technical engagement with the form of comics and the way the form engages questions of law and justice, or queries or challenges the kind of dominant forms of law and justice as well. I'm not sure if that was 2 minutes, but that's kind of my thoughts in a brief way. Yeah, sorry, I'll stop.
I think to pick up on a couple of other parts of Deborah's question, there's and so Tom spoke I think to sort of the justification for the field and its theoretical undergirding, and there is a rich literature that sort of talks to the intersections of law and culture and cultural forms as legal forms and that sort of thing. But there's then a reasonable portion of it that is all organic, which was kind of what Amanda was sort of speaking to, that it comes to the texts that you come across and engage, that at one level speak to something that you're actually already sort of working on or thinking about, and it becomes a way of actually extending that work. And so that's sort of one aspect of it. I know at times I do the opposite, that I go, I'm actually dealing with some particular issues in legal theory or particular other areas of my work, and then I actually sort of go looking for cultural texts that actually are doing something in that space as well, and so go searching for it. Or when I have the benefit of research assistants, I send them to go look for cultural texts that are actually playing in that space already as well. So hopefully those comments have helped, Deborah. Others are very welcome to jump into the conversation if they would like as well.
I'll say something. I don't really have anything to add. I very much largely agree with everything that's already been said. For me, I would probably I'm probably more on Amanda's side in terms of it being still something of an intuitive process. You read something, you see what is being talked about, what is being discussed, what is capturing the moment for a lot of people. Those are kind of the texts that I tend to draw towards, or those texts that are doing something different. So something that I haven't seen before. I'm particularly experiential with my texts. So I like to see, you know, how they're making me feel when I read them. Do they occupy my mind when I'm not reading them? And if so, you know, perhaps there's something underlying that is, you know, deeper than just a narrative. And, you know, yeah, it can be done narratively. It can be done through kind of the medium and that experience with the modality of the text as well. I don't think there's one method. It's probably definitely something that you kind of have to experience and work out for yourself and figure out, you know, what works for you. But, you know, it's, if you enjoy popular culture and you enjoy Law and Justice, then it's you know, it's a fun avenue of research that also has some really you know, useful and also serious applications as well. So, you know, it's a good space to be in.
Yeah, I would echo the intuitive nature of it as well, despite what I've just said about the kind of rich theoretical reasoning that you can attach to why we can engage with these kinds of texts. I think it is an intuitive thing, and the kind of justifications that I was talking about are me trying to make sense of that intuition and trying to explain it to undergraduate law students and to, shall we say, certain types of legal academic who need convincing, but it is an intuitive thing. So it's the idea is that you have something and it makes sense of law in some way, and it has some sort of legal content, and then you can read it and explore it, and then it opens up to a whole kind of world of different disciplinary perspectives and different methods and ways of reading, depending upon exactly what you're looking at. So it's very much a personal journey.
My friends say that it's kind of difficult to watch things with me because all the time I was just like, stop, stop, stop. Oh my God, this has to do with the law. And no, Amanda, shut up. Let's just watch. I can't do that anymore. It just comes to me all the time. So
yes, it potentially destroys your enjoyment of certain aspects of popular culture. We still have a little bit more time, so if are we happy to continue on more general questions if there are from the group.
I have one, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
I'd like to know if it is that conservative for you and United Kingdom and Australia too, to research about cultural legal studies, because here we have a lot of resistance, you know, law and literature, okay, but pop culture is a little bit too much. So I'd like to know how it happens outside Latin America, just to understand.
Well, so I think Tom's comment before about, you know, needing to convince certain types of academics as to the validity of the field, those conversations still do occur, and there are still, you know, aspects of our legal academies that question the approach. I guess we certainly have the benefit of those sort of conversations having been going on for quite a while, you know, extending out of the law and literature movement, parts of the law and society movement, and then, you know, particularly over the last 20 years, are building, you know, scholarship of cultural legal studies that crosses the disciplines, and so is doing, you know, that good sort of interdisciplinary work that actually engages across the disciplines in a sophisticated fashion. So we sort of have that benefit, and we also have the benefit of certain organisations, such as Graphic Justice is one, the Law and Humanities Association of Australasia, you know, in the US, the Association for Law, Culture and Humanities. So we have, you know, networks of scholars that build these conversations, which helps that. And so it's, you know, it means we're sort of talking to people that get it more than we're talking to people that don't get it, at least when we're sort of going out to our academic events, which makes it just means you end up doing better work because you're actually not constantly having to explain why you're doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would echo those comments. And as I said, the critical legal conference in the UK as well. It's not distinctly kind of humanities oriented or culturally oriented, but it's a kind of more general critical studies of law. So it's very open-minded. As long as you've got a decent argument, they'll take anything. So there's a bit of kind of cultural work goes on there, and that's where I present most of my work within the UK. So yeah, so I often find that it's quite rare to find like a department where there's multiple people doing this kind of work. USC obviously is an exception. But basically in the UK, there's one or two departments that have a more critical or interdisciplinary kind of approach. But often it's pockets of people here and there, or one or two people. So it is the kind of networks and the associations that really kind of keep it alive, and finding the kind of the best spaces where you can actually speak and be understood and be heard and be able to develop your work. I found a lot of the time that early on I was presenting to open-minded audiences, particularly in the kind of law and society kind of areas, so I'd present quite a sophisticated, amazing, brilliant analysis of some comic, and they'd go, "Ooh, that's interesting," because they'd never seen anything like it, and they didn't know how to orient themselves and couldn't really ask meaningful questions. So they would always get hung up on the kind of methodological questions rather than engaging with what I was actually doing. So that was quite frustrating. But then when you find the things like Tim was talking about, like the Australian Association for Law and Humanities, LCH, and all the other places, it's really, really very good to explore those. But yeah, we do have to have those kinds of conversations sometimes. But it depends on the department you go to, and it depends on the type of academics you speak to. Here at Dundee, I presented on a one-page comic for my job interview presentation, and they gave me a job. Don't know why, but you know. So, but you could. So there are places where that's open-minded enough. Yeah, but in terms of, it is still the dominant studies in law is still very much socio-legal and the more kind of dogmatic stuff.
I often find the conversations with the dogmatic or the doctrinal can be more interesting than some of the socio-legal, actually, because like the good doctrinal people are doing interpretive work. So they're interpreting legal texts, more traditional legal texts, whereas often we're interpreting cultural texts. But you can sort of have that sort of conversation because they actually pay attention to the detail. So you can actually sort of still have some of those interesting conversations, even if they're more doctrinal scholars.
Yeah, that's interesting. And also because the law and society stuff tends to be more increasingly so more oriented towards empirical work, right? So it's about understanding law in society. So it's interdisciplinary and it's open, but it's very much more towards the kind of empirical understanding of society, whereas a doctrinal lawyer is still working in the imagination, right? So it kind of works on a similar level, so as long as you can get them into the right conceptual space.
Yeah.
Thank you for the answer. I think that it's very interesting that critical legal studies is arriving right now in Brazil with more strength. We haven't read about critical legal studies or stuff like that in our undergraduate courses until now. Now they're coming through many ways. Some people are translating them from English to Portuguese, and then it's becoming more accessible to students. So I hope soon cultural legal studies is not a big deal here anymore. Just like, you can't do that. No, other people are already doing that outside here. So let's join them. Let's make this kind of research together because it's very enlightening, in my opinion. So that's very interesting to hear both of you. Thank you.
I might add on. it's I think I've had a lot of benefit from being a little bit of a younger scholar as well, and often having had those conversations already done for me. Like coming into this space, I haven't had to deal with a lot of that legitimizing myself, thanks to kind of some of the work that has already been happening in Australia and more broadly globally. So hopefully, you know, you can get to a point where you aren't having to explain, but unfortunately, if you're still kind of paving that road, you know, by doing it, you are actually helping future cultural legal scholars as well in making that an actual space in which they can exist without having to deal with those questions. That's all.
Well, I think we have a